Get out of my face! You don't belong in first class. People like you should be back in coach with the rest of the welfare abusers.
Victoria Langford spat the words as she slid into seat 2A, ignoring Marcus Reed's boarding pass like it meant nothing.
Crack!
Her hand struck his cheek, the sound slicing through the luxury cabin's silence. Marcus didn't flinch. He touched his jaw, then rose, calm and deliberate. Victoria, rich, white, daughter of the airline's CEO, stood trembling with self-righteous fury, certain her power made her untouchable. But what she didn't know was that the man she'd just humiliated wasn't just another passenger. Marcus reached inside his jacket, pulled out a badge, and let the gold shine under the cabin lights. U.S. Air Marshal. He looked her in the eye. "Ma'am, you're under arrest." Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Morning sunlight streamed across the polished floors. Marcus Reed stood in the orderly line at gate B17, his leather briefcase held loosely at his side. His dark suit was crisp, his tie perfectly straight, a habit from his military days that served him well as an air marshal. He watched the bustling crowd with calm, practiced eyes, taking in every detail while appearing completely at ease. "Beautiful morning for flying," the gate agent said with a genuine smile as she checked his boarding pass. Her name tag read Patricia. "Sure is," Marcus replied warmly. "Clear skies all the way to Chicago, I hear." While they chatted, his gaze swept the gate area in steady sweeps, left to right, back again. The comfortable quiet was shattered by the sharp click of designer heels against tile. A woman in her early 30s strode through the security checkpoint, her blonde hair bouncing with each determined step. Two matching Louis Vuitton bags swung from her arms, and her face wore an expression of perpetual annoyance. "Excuse me," she snapped at a TSA agent who dared to ask for her ID. "Do you know who I am?" "Victoria Langford." "Yes, that Langford." "My father owns half this airport." The TSA agent's face fell, but he maintained his professionalism. "Ma'am, I still need to see your identification. It's federal regulation." Victoria rolled her eyes dramatically and dug through her purse, muttering loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is ridiculous. I fly first class every week. I shouldn't have to deal with this nonsense." Marcus watched the scene unfold, keeping his face neutral even as he noted every detail of her behavior. The way she thrust her ID at the agent without making eye contact. How she snatched it back before he was done examining it. The entitled tilt of her chin as she swept past him without a word of thanks. At the gate, Victoria marched straight to the front of the priority boarding line, cutting in front of several passengers who had been waiting patiently. An elderly man in a business suit opened his mouth to object, but Victoria silenced him with a withering glare. "I have priority boarding," she announced to no one in particular, waving her first-class ticket like a royal decree. "I'm not waiting behind all these people." The gate agent, Patricia, glanced nervously at Victoria's ticket. Recognition flickered across her face at the Langford name, and her shoulders tensed visibly. Marcus could read the internal struggle in her expression. Follow proper boarding procedure or avoid confrontation with the CEO's daughter. "Of course, Ms. Langford," Patricia said quietly, her earlier warmth replaced with careful neutrality. "You're welcome to board whenever you're ready." Victoria's smirk of satisfaction made Marcus's jaw tighten slightly, but he maintained his calm demeanor. This wasn't his first encounter with entitled passengers, and it wouldn't be his last. His role required him to remain unnoticed, just another business traveler in the crowd. As other first-class passengers began to line up, Marcus observed how they gave Victoria a wide berth, like planets orbiting a volatile sun. She stood examining her manicure, occasionally shooting impatient looks at Patricia, who was trying to organize the boarding process as efficiently as possible. "Now boarding our first-class passengers and those needing special assistance." Patricia announced over the intercom, her voice steady, despite Victoria's constant glaring. Victoria immediately pushed forward, not even waiting for Patricia to scan her boarding pass. "Finally," she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I thought we'd be standing here all day." Marcus waited his turn patiently, exchanging a sympathetic look with Patricia as she scanned his boarding pass. "Have a good flight, sir," she said quietly, clearly relieved to interact with a courteous passenger. The jet bridge stretched ahead, its accordion walls creating shadows in the morning light. Marcus walked unhurried, his footsteps measured and quiet. Ahead, Victoria's heels clicked against the metal floor like angry punctuation marks as she stormed forward, designer bags swinging wildly. A young mother struggling with a car seat and diaper bag tried to press against the wall to let Victoria pass, but one of the Louis Vuitton bags still clipped her shoulder. Victoria didn't even pause to acknowledge the collision. "Sorry," the mother called out reflexively, though she'd done nothing wrong. Marcus slowed his pace, giving the mother space to adjust her bags. "Let me help you with that," he offered, carefully lifting the car seat over a bump in the jet bridge floor. "Thank you," she said with genuine gratitude, but Victoria's voice carried back to them, sharp with impatience. "Could you people move any slower?" she called over her shoulder, already disappearing into the aircraft's doorway. Marcus maintained his steady pace, watching Victoria vanish into the plane like a thundercloud rolling in before a storm. His training had taught him to read people, to spot potential threats and disruptions. Victoria Langford wasn't a security threat in the traditional sense, but her behavior set off warning bells in his experienced mind. Still, he kept his observations to himself as he approached the aircraft door, nodding politely to the flight attendant waiting to greet passengers. The young mother with the car seat followed behind him, now more at ease with her awkward load. Other passengers filed into the jet bridge in orderly fashion, the morning sun casting their shadows long against the walls. The usual pre-flight murmur of conversations and shuffling bags filled the air. But ahead, they could all hear Victoria's voice raised in complaint about something else, her words muffled, but her tone unmistakable. The first-class cabin gleamed with polished surfaces and plush leather seats. Marcus moved deliberately down the aisle, his trained eyes automatically noting the location of emergency exits and equipment. His assigned seat, 2A, waited by the window, a prime spot for maintaining situational awareness of the entire cabin. He placed his leather briefcase in the overhead bin with practiced efficiency, keeping his movements smooth and understated. The morning sun streaming through the small window cast warm patterns across the leather seat. Marcus began to lower himself into 2A, already mentally reviewing the flight manifest he'd studied earlier. A loud thud interrupted his thoughts as a heavy designer purse landed squarely in his seat. The bag's gold hardware glinted in the sunlight as it settled into the leather cushion. Marcus straightened up, turning to face Victoria Langford, who stood in the aisle with her hand still extended from tossing the purse. "Excuse me," Marcus said politely, maintaining the professional calm that had served him through countless situations. "I believe you've put your bag in my seat." Victoria's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched upward. Her lips curled into a practiced smirk that suggested she'd had this conversation before, and always gotten her way. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I think you're a little confused. This is my seat." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved his boarding pass. "Actually, I have seat 2A right here," he said, holding out the document for her inspection. "Would you mind checking your boarding pass?" Victoria didn't even glance at the paper in his hand. Instead, she let out a short, sharp laugh that drew the attention of nearby passengers. "Listen," she said, leaning closer as if sharing a secret, though her voice remained deliberately loud. "I always sit in 2A. It's the best seat in first class, and Daddy makes sure it's reserved for me." You must have misread your ticket." The sweet scent of her expensive perfume couldn't mask the sour note in her voice. Marcus maintained his calm demeanor, though he noticed other passengers shifting uncomfortably in their seats. A businessman across the aisle suddenly became very interested in his phone, while an elderly couple pretended to study the safety card with intense focus. "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear, "I understand the confusion, but I can assure you this is my assigned seat. Would you please check your boarding pass?" Victoria's face hardened, her carefully applied makeup creasing slightly around her eyes. "Do you know who my father is?" she demanded, placing one manicured hand on her hip. "Charles Langford? The CEO of this airline? Ring any bells?" Before Marcus could respond, a flight attendant approached, drawn by the growing tension. She was young, with a name tag that read Sarah, and her professional smile couldn't quite hide her nervousness. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, glancing between Marcus and Victoria. "No, everything is not all right," Victoria snapped, turning her glare on the flight attendant. "This man is trying to steal my seat. I need you to sort this out immediately." "Of course, Ms. Langford," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could I see both of your boarding passes, please?" Marcus handed his over without hesitation. Victoria rolled her eyes dramatically before digging through her second designer bag, pulling out a crumpled boarding pass and thrusting it at the flight attendant. Sarah studied both documents carefully, her face paling slightly as she confirmed what Marcus already knew. "Ms. Langford," she said hesitantly, "I'm sorry, but this seat is actually assigned to Mr. Reed. Your seat is 4C. "Excuse me?" Victoria's voice rose sharply, causing several more passengers to turn and stare. "That's impossible. Check again." "I have checked, ma'am," Sarah replied, her voice trembling slightly. "The system shows that seat 2A was assigned to Mr. Reed when he checked in this morning." Victoria snatched both boarding passes from Sarah's hands, scanning them with narrowed eyes. Her face flushed red as she realized she couldn't dispute the evidence in front of her. But instead of backing down, she drew herself up to her full height, designer heels adding to her imposing stance. "I don't care what the boarding passes say," she declared, loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. "I've told you who my father is. One call from me, and you'll be serving drinks in coach on regional flights for the rest of your career." She jabbed a finger toward Sarah, who took a small step backward. Marcus remained perfectly still, his face neutral but alert. He'd handled countless hostile situations in his career, and he recognized the signs of escalating tension. Other passengers were now openly watching the scene unfold, some with phones discreetly pointed in their direction. "Ms. Langford," he said calmly, "there's no need for threats. The airline has clear policies about assigned seating, and I'm sure we can resolve this professionally." Victoria swung around to face him, leaning forward until she was uncomfortably close. Her voice dropped to a harsh whisper, though still loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Listen here," she hissed, her perfectly painted lips curled in disgust. "I don't know who you think you are, but you clearly don't understand how things work. This is my airline, these are my planes, and this is my seat." The air in the first-class cabin grew thick with tension. Sarah stood frozen, clutching her hands together, while other passengers shifted uneasily in their seats. Through the galley, Marcus could see another flight attendant speaking quietly into the cabin phone, likely calling for backup. Victoria's designer perfume filled the small space between them as she continued to lean closer, her voice rising with each word. "So why don't you just grab your little briefcase and find your actual seat in coach where you belong?" The tension in the first-class cabin had become unbearable. Every passenger sat rigid in their seats, eyes fixed on the confrontation unfolding before them. The only sounds were the distant hum of the engines and Victoria's increasingly aggressive voice. Marcus maintained his professional composure, though he could feel the weight of every stare. His years of training had prepared him for hostile situations, but this one was testing his patience in ways he hadn't expected. He kept his hands visible at his sides, his stance non-threatening but firm. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "I've shown you my boarding pass. The seat assignment is clear. Please collect your belongings so we can both move on with our day." Victoria's face contorted with rage. She glanced around the cabin, seemingly drawing energy from the audience she'd gathered. "You people are all the same," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "Always trying to take what isn't yours." A collective intake of breath rippled through the cabin. Sarah, the flight attendant, stepped forward hesitantly. "Ms. Langford, please!" "Shut up!" Victoria snapped, causing Sarah to retreat. She turned back to Marcus, her designer jewelry catching the light as she gestured wildly. "First, you try to steal my seat. What's next? My bags? My watch?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but his voice remained steady. "Those accusations are both inappropriate and incorrect. I'm simply trying to sit in my assigned seat." "Oh, please!" Victoria's voice rose higher, echoing off the cabin walls. "We all know what's really happening here. You saw a chance to upgrade yourself to first class, and you probably forged that boarding pass." The elderly couple across the aisle exchanged uncomfortable glances. A businessman 2 rows back had his phone raised, clearly recording the incident. Marcus could see a second flight attendant, hovering near the galley, speaking urgently into a phone. "Ms. Langford," Marcus said, his tone firm but controlled, "I'm going to say this one last time. I don't care who your father is. I don't care what seat you usually sit in. This is my assigned seat, and you need to step aside." Victoria's eyes widened at his direct challenge. Her perfectly manicured hands clenched into fists at her sides. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Marcus replied calmly. "And it doesn't change the facts. Please move your bag." Victoria's face flushed deep red. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, her designer blouse rising and falling with each angry breath. "You uppity little," she started, then caught herself, though the implication hung heavy in the air. Marcus took a slow, deliberate breath. He'd faced prejudice before, but rarely so blatantly, so publicly. "Ms. Langford, your behavior is becoming increasingly inappropriate. I suggest you lower your voice and—" "Don't you dare tell me what to do!" Victoria screamed, stepping even closer. "You're nothing! You're nobody! This is my airline, and I won't let some thief tell me where I can and can't sit." Several passengers gasped at her words. Sarah pressed herself against the galley wall, looking desperately toward the cockpit door. The businessman with the phone adjusted his position, making sure to capture every moment. Marcus stood his ground, his expression unchanged. "Step aside, Ms. Langford. Now." Something in his quiet authority seemed to snap what little restraint Victoria had left. Her face contorted with fury, and before anyone could react, she swung her arm in a wide arc. Her hand connected with Marcus's cheek with a crack that echoed through the cabin. The sound of the slap seemed to freeze time. Passengers sat in shocked silence, mouths hanging open. Sarah covered her face with her hands. The elderly woman across the aisle let out a small scream. Marcus's head had barely moved from the impact. He stood perfectly still, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. She stood there, hand still raised, a look of smug satisfaction spreading across her features. "Now," she said, her voice thick with contempt, "get out of my sight before I have security drag you off this plane." The cabin remained deathly quiet. Marcus slowly raised his right hand, not to touch his reddened cheek, but to reach into his jacket pocket. Victoria's triumphant smile began to falter, as he withdrew something that caught the morning sunlight streaming through the windows. Gold glinted as Marcus held up his badge, making sure everyone in the cabin could see it clearly. "Federal Air Marshal," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silence. "Ms. Langford, you have just assaulted a federal officer." The color drained from Victoria's face so quickly, it was as if someone had pulled a plug. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish out of water. Around them, passengers let out long-held breaths, some murmuring in shock, others nodding in grim satisfaction. The badge continued to catch the light as Marcus held it steady, its authority transforming the entire dynamic of the confrontation in an instant. Victoria's previous bravado evaporated, replaced by the first flickers of genuine fear as she finally understood the magnitude of her mistake. Sarah had pressed her hand to her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. The businessman with the phone gave a low whistle, still recording. Through the sudden murmur of voices that filled the cabin, the click of the cockpit door opening echoed like a gunshot. Marcus remained motionless, his badge still raised, as Victoria took her first uncertain step backward. Her designer heels wobbled slightly on the carpet, her previous confidence shattered by the simple sight of that golden shield. The silence in the cabin felt electric as Marcus's badge caught the morning light. Several passengers pulled out their phones, not wanting to miss what would happen next. Victoria's perfectly styled hair seemed to wilt as the reality of her situation sank in. "Ms. Langford," Marcus said, his voice carrying the full weight of federal authority, "you are under arrest for assaulting a federal officer. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." Victoria's mouth dropped open in genuine shock. For a moment, she seemed unable to process that someone was actually holding her accountable. Then her face twisted into a snarl. "You can't arrest me!" she shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that made several passengers wince. "Do you have any idea who my father is?" "Your father's identity doesn't change federal law," Marcus replied calmly, reaching into his briefcase to retrieve a pair of flex cuffs. "Now, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." Victoria's eyes darted around the cabin, searching for allies, but found only phones recording her every move. The elderly couple had shrunk back in their seats. The businessman who'd been filming gave her a small wave, his phone still steadily capturing the scene. "This is ridiculous," she spat, backing away from Marcus. "I'll have your badge for this." "My father will destroy you." Her designer heel caught on the carpet, making her stumble slightly. "Sarah!" she barked at the flight attendant. "Call security right now. Tell them this man is harassing me." Sarah, still pressed against the galley wall, looked uncertainly between Victoria and Marcus. Her training hadn't covered this situation. Marcus produced his credentials, showing them to Sarah. "Ma'am, I need your cooperation in this matter. Please contact the captain and inform him we have a federal situation requiring law enforcement to meet us at the gate." Sarah nodded quickly, relief washing over her face at having clear direction. She hurried to the cockpit phone, her hands shaking slightly as she dialed. Victoria's breathing became more erratic. "You can't touch me," she said, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "I'll sue you. I'll sue this whole airline. My lawyers will—" "Ms. Langford," Marcus cut in, his tone firm but professional. "You've already committed one federal offense. Don't make it worse by resisting arrest. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Now." More phones appeared from the coach section as passengers crowded forward to see what was happening. Victoria's face flushed deeper red as she realized how many people were witnessing her humiliation. "This is assault!" she screamed as Marcus stepped forward. "He's attacking me because I'm white. Someone help me." Not a single passenger moved to intervene. The businessman recording actually chuckled. "Lady," he said, "we all saw what happened. Maybe save the performance for your lawyer?" Marcus moved with practiced efficiency, taking hold of Victoria's arm with just enough pressure to control but not hurt her. She tried to pull away, but years of training made his grip impossible to break. "Stop resisting," he said calmly, using his body weight to turn her around. "You're only making things worse for yourself." Victoria's designer blouse wrinkled as Marcus secured her hands behind her back with the flex cuffs. "This is so tight," she complained. "These are probably leaving marks. I demand you loosen them right now." "The restraints are properly applied," Marcus replied evenly. "They're not too tight. You're just uncomfortable because you've never been held accountable before." A few passengers actually applauded at that, quickly stopping when Marcus shook his head slightly. This wasn't entertainment. It was law enforcement. Sarah returned from the cockpit, her composure somewhat restored. "The captain has notified ground authorities," she reported. "They'll be waiting at the gate. Where would you like us to seat, Ms. Langford?" "Last row," Marcus directed. "I need a clear line of sight." He turned to Victoria. "We're going to walk calmly to the back of the plane now. Any more outbursts will be noted in my report. My father will hear about every second of this," Victoria hissed as Marcus guided her forward. "He's friends with senators, with the head of Homeland Security. Your career is over, you stupid." "That's enough," Marcus cut her off firmly. "Every threat you make is being recorded, both by passengers and by me. I suggest you exercise your right to remain silent." They made their way down the aisle, Victoria stumbling slightly in her expensive heels. Coach passengers quickly raised their phones, capturing her walk of shame. Some whispered and pointed, others just shook their heads in disgust. "This isn't fair," Victoria whimpered, trying a different approach. Tears began rolling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, okay? I just got upset. You don't have to do this." Marcus remained professionally detached. "You assaulted a federal officer. There are consequences for that choice." Reaching the last row, Marcus helped Victoria into the window seat, checking that the flex cuffs were still secure. She slumped against the window, mascara starting to run as her fake tears continued. "My wrists hurt," she complained. "And this seat is disgusting. Do you know how much this outfit costs?" Marcus ignored her, addressing the flight attendant who had followed them. "Please ensure no one approaches the prisoner without my authorization. I'll need a passenger manifest and incident report forms." "Of course, sir," the flight attendant replied, clearly relieved to have a professional handling the situation. Making his way back to first class, Marcus could feel the appreciative glances from passengers. He nodded politely but remained focused on his duty. Reaching his now vacant seat, the one that had started all this, he sat down, positioning himself to maintain a clear view of the cabin and his prisoner. Victoria's threats and complaints could still be heard faintly from the back, but they seemed to have lost their power. Passengers began settling back into their seats, though many kept glancing back, phones ready in case anything else happened. Marcus remained alert but calm, his presence bringing a sense of order to the previously chaotic cabin. He pulled out his own phone, beginning to type his preliminary report while the details were fresh. In the reflection of the window, he could see the red mark on his cheek where Victoria had slapped him, evidence that would be photographed and documented once they landed. Sarah, the flight attendant, approached Marcus with a tense expression. "Sir, the captain would like a word with you in the forward galley," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the back of the plane where Victoria sat. Marcus nodded, rising smoothly from his seat. As he made his way to the galley, he could hear Victoria's continued complaints echoing from the rear. Something about her constitutional rights and her father's golf games with the Secretary of Transportation. The captain stood waiting in the cramped galley space, his shoulders tight beneath his crisp uniform. Captain David Chen was a veteran pilot with over 20 years of experience, but right now he looked as uncomfortable as a rookie on his first flight. "Marshal Reed," the captain said quietly. We have a situation developing. He glanced around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. Corporate leadership is already aware of the incident. Marcus maintained his professional composure. That's to be expected, Captain. It's a serious federal offense. Yes, well? Captain Chen shifted his weight, clearly struggling with what he needed to say next. I've received direct orders from Charles Langford himself. He's demanding that we handle this internally. Internally? Marcus kept his voice level, though he felt a familiar tension building in his chest. The captain nodded, looking miserable. Mr. Langford wants us to return to the gate. He's arranged for private security to handle the situation. His exact words were to make this incident disappear. He pulled at his collar, sweat visible on his brow despite the cool air. He reminded me that he signs my paychecks. Marcus studied the captain's face, recognizing the conflict there. Captain Chen, I understand you're in a difficult position, but this isn't a customer service issue that can be smoothed over. Ms. Langford assaulted a federal officer. That's a serious crime with mandatory protocols. Marshal, you don't understand, Chen said, lowering his voice further. Charles Langford doesn't just run the airline. He practically owns half the board of directors. He's got senators on speed dial. When he says jump, people ask how high. The law applies equally to everyone, Marcus replied firmly, regardless of their last name or their father's connections. The captain ran a hand through his graying hair. Look, I agree with you. What she did was completely out of line. But Langford made it clear that anyone who cooperates with pressing charges will be looking for a new job. He's already got the PR team spinning this as a misunderstanding. Marcus squared his shoulders, meeting the captain's worried gaze. Captain, let me be very clear. I've already placed Ms. Langford under arrest. Any attempt to interfere with that arrest or obstruct my duties as a federal officer would constitute a separate criminal offense. Are you prepared to add that to your report? Chen paled slightly. No, of course not. He glanced toward the cockpit. Langford is insisting we return to the gate immediately. He's got his corporate security team standing by. That's fine, Marcus said calmly. We can return to the gate, but Miss Langford will be remanded to federal custody, not private security. Any attempt to interfere will result in additional charges, not just for her, but for anyone who assists in obstructing justice. The captain seemed to deflate slightly, both relieved and worried. I'll radio ahead about our return. But, Marshal, he hesitated. Watch your back. Langford doesn't play fair when his family's involved. Last year, a gate agent filed a complaint after Victoria verbally abused her. The woman was fired the next day, and no one's hired her since. Marcus nodded, understanding the warning but unmoved by it. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Captain. Please ensure all communication logs and incident reports are preserved. They may be needed as evidence. As Marcus turned to leave, Chen caught his arm. One more thing, the captain said quietly. The crew saw everything. We'll back up your account, whatever pressure they put on us. Some things are more important than a paycheck. I appreciate that, Marcus replied. Document everything. There may be investigators who want to speak with you. Returning to his seat, Marcus could feel the subtle shift in the plane's direction as they began their return to the gate. Victoria was still in the back, but her earlier ranting had been replaced by intense whispers into her phone. Even from this distance, Marcus could see the satisfied smirk playing across her face. Sarah approached with a cup of water, setting it carefully on his armrest. I heard about the captain's conversation, she said softly. For what it's worth, the whole crew saw what happened. We've had problems with her before, but no one's ever stood up to her. Marcus accepted the water with a nod of thanks. Has she caused trouble on other flights? Several times, Sarah confirmed, straightening a stack of magazines to appear busy. Last month, She demanded a first-class passenger give up their seat because she was too important to sit in business class. When they refused, she accidentally spilled red wine all over them. But her father's office always smooths things over. From the back of the plane, Victoria's voice carried forward. "Daddy's taking care of everything. That rent-a-cop has no idea who he's dealing with. I want him fired and blacklisted. Yes, I know you can do it. Just make him go away like the others." Marcus pulled out his notebook, making careful notes about Victoria's threats and the flight attendant's account of previous incidents. The businessman across the aisle leaned over. "Got it all on video," he said quietly, holding up his phone. "Including what she's saying right now. My daughter's been a civil rights lawyer for 10 years. I know exactly how important documentation is in cases like this." Marcus gave him a professional nod. "I may need to contact you for a statement." The plane began its descent, the change in altitude causing Victoria to raise her voice further. "I don't care what it costs. Just fix it. You always fix it." Sarah shook her head as she prepared the cabin for landing. "Maybe this time someone will finally make it stick," she murmured. Marcus remained focused on his notes, adding details about the captain's conversation and the witness accounts. Through the window, he could see the airport growing larger as they approached. Ground crews were already gathering near their assigned gate, and among them he spotted several men in dark suits who didn't move like regular airport personnel. The plane turned back toward the gate where several dark vehicles waited on the tarmac. Through the window, Marcus spotted a mix of federal agents and what appeared to be corporate security, the latter easy to identify by their expensive suits and earpieces. Victoria's voice carried from the back of the plane, still on her phone. "They're all here, Daddy. Make them fix this now." Her tone dripped with entitled confidence. As the aircraft came to a stop, Marcus stood and made his way to where Victoria sat. 2 other federal agents had already boarded through the rear door, nodding to him in recognition. "Ms. Langford," Marcus said calmly, "please stand up. These agents will escort you inside." Victoria rose, awkwardly managing her designer bags despite the flex cuffs. "You're going to regret this," she spat. "My father's lawyers will have your badge by dinner." The other passengers watched intently as the agents led Victoria toward the exit. Many had their phones out, still recording. The businessman who'd spoken to Marcus earlier gave him a supportive nod. "It's about time someone stood up to her," an elderly woman in first class said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Several others murmured in agreement. Sarah, the flight attendant, handed Marcus a written statement she'd prepared. "The whole crew signed it," she said quietly. "We all saw everything." Marcus followed the group down the jet bridge, maintaining his professional demeanor despite Victoria's continued threats and complaints. The terminal had been partially cleared, but several passengers from the flight lingered nearby, phones still recording. A corporate security team waited at the gate, led by a square-jawed man in an expensive suit. "We'll take it from here," he announced, reaching for Victoria's arm. "No, you won't," Marcus stated firmly. "Ms. Langford is under federal arrest. She'll be processed according to protocol." The security chief's jaw tightened. "Mr. Langford has arranged." "Mr. Langford's arrangements are irrelevant," Marcus cut him off. "This is a federal matter now." Victoria was escorted to a secure holding area, a sterile room with fluorescent lighting and bare walls. 2 chairs sat on either side of a metal table, with cameras mounted in the corners. Marcus began filling out his incident report, while Victoria paced, her designer heels clicking against the tile floor. "My father's sending his best lawyers," she announced, her voice thick with smug satisfaction. "The ones who handle all our special problems. They'll be here any minute." Marcus continued writing, documenting every detail with precise clarity. The slap, the racial slurs, the threats made afterward, the captain's warning about corporate interference. More federal agents arrived, but their demeanor wasn't what Marcus expected. They lingered near the door, exchanging uncertain glances. Finally, one of them, Agent Thompson, a veteran Marcus had worked with before, approached the table. "Reed," Thompson said quietly, "we need to talk." He glanced at Victoria, then back to Marcus. "In private." Marcus kept writing. "I'm completing my incident report." Thompson shifted uncomfortably. "Look, this could get political. Fast. We've already received calls from 2 senators' offices and the Secretary of Transportation." "Is that supposed to affect federal law enforcement?" Marcus asked without looking up. "Don't be naive," Victoria interjected. "Daddy's already spoken to your director. You're just too stupid to realize your career is over." Thompson winced slightly. "Reed, maybe we should consider alternative resolution options. Mr. Langford has suggested—" "I'm not interested in Mr. Langford's suggestions," Marcus stated, his pen moving steadily across the paper. "I'm interested in enforcing the law. Equally. For everyone." Another agent, Martinez, entered the room. "The airline's legal team is here. They're demanding immediate release and saying something about jurisdictional issues." "There are no jurisdictional issues," Marcus replied calmly. "The assault occurred in flight, against a federal officer. It's clearly within our authority." Victoria laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "God, you really don't get it, do you? Rules are for little people. My father owns half the people in this building." Thompson leaned closer to Marcus. "The brass is nervous. This could affect funding, promotions, a lot of careers. Maybe we could classify it as a misunderstanding. Let their lawyers handle it internally." Marcus looked up for the first time, meeting Thompson's gaze. "Is that what you would suggest if she had slapped a white air marshal? Or if her father worked at Walmart instead of running an airline?" Thompson had the decency to look ashamed. Martinez studied his shoes. The sound of expensive shoes echoed in the hallway. Victoria's face lit up. "Finally, those are Daddy's lawyers. Now you'll see what real power looks like." Marcus returned to his report, adding final details with careful precision. He noted the time, location, witness statements, and every attempt at interference. When he finished, he signed his name with firm, clear strokes. Victoria's smirk grew wider as voices approached outside. "Last chance to make this go away quietly. Daddy always says everyone has a price. Name yours." Marcus stood, gathering his completed report. The documents were comprehensive, irrefutable, and backed by dozens of witness statements and videos. He placed them firmly on the desk, squarely in front of Thompson. "My price?" Marcus met Victoria's gaze steadily. "Equal justice under law. No exceptions." The door opened behind him as several expensive suits entered, already talking about dismissals and sealed records. Marcus turned to face them, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights, his report secure in federal custody. Victoria's voice rang out with absolute confidence. "These are Daddy's fixers. They'll make everything disappear, just like always." Marcus sat in the airport terminal's break room, his phone buzzing constantly with notifications. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow as he scrolled through his social media feeds, watching the incident unfold from dozens of angles. Each passenger's video told the same stark story. Entitled, "CEO's Daughter Slaps Black Air Marshal," "Justice for Marcus," read one viral tweet, already reaching hundreds of thousands of views. The clearest video came from the businessman in 3A. It captured everything. Victoria's racial slurs, her aggressive stance, the sudden slap that echoed through the cabin, and Marcus's calm revelation of his badge. Comments flooded in by the thousands. "This is what privilege looks like. She thought she could get away with assault? Look how professional he stayed the whole time." Local news stations had already picked up the story. Marcus watched as the Atlanta Evening News ran the footage, reporters standing outside the airport with microphones ready. "Breaking news tonight. The daughter of Major Airlines CEO Charles Langford was arrested after assaulting a federal air marshal. His phone rang. It was Angela Porter, the TSA supervisor he'd worked with before. "Marcus, you're trending on every platform," she said without preamble. "Have you seen the coverage?" "I'm watching it now," he replied, rubbing his tired eyes. "The videos are everywhere." "Good. The more eyes on this, the harder it'll be for them to bury it." Angela's voice carried years of experience with corporate cover-ups. "How are you holding up?" Marcus glanced through the break room window. Corporate lawyers still huddled near the holding area, their faces tense as they worked phones and tablets. "I'm fine. Just doing my job." "The public's on your side," Angela said. "Check CNN. They're running it nationally now." He switched to the news channel on the break room TV. Sure enough, there was Victoria's face in a corporate headshot, next to footage of the incident. The caption read, "Airline CEO's daughter arrested after assaulting federal officer." More notifications lit up his phone. The video had reached millions of views. Social justice advocates were sharing it, calling for accountability. Civil rights leaders were issuing statements demanding an investigation into the airline's history of covering up incidents. "They can't sweep this under the rug," a janitor commented as he emptied the break room trash. "Not with all those phones recording." Marcus nodded, though he knew better than to assume anything. Still, watching the public reaction felt vindicating. The truth was out there, raw and undeniable. His own agency's public affairs office had released a brief statement. "We are aware of the incident involving one of our air marshals and are reviewing all available information." Victoria's face appeared again on the TV screen, this time from an interview she'd given months ago about her charity work. The contrast between her polished public image and today's behavior was stark. Comments online were already digging up her history. Previous incidents at restaurants, hotels, and other flights that had mysteriously disappeared from record. "Look at this," Angela texted him. She'd found an archived news story about Victoria being escorted out of a Miami beach club last year after allegedly attacking a server. The charges had vanished within days. The hashtag #JusticeForMarcus climbed higher on trending lists. More passengers from the flight posted their accounts. "I was in first class. She was completely out of control. The air marshal stayed professional even after she hit him. She kept screaming about her daddy fixing everything." Marcus's email pinged with interview requests from major networks. His phone showed missed calls from reporters at every major newspaper. He let them go to voicemail, focusing instead on the mounting public response. Civil rights organizations released statements supporting his actions. Police accountability groups praised his professionalism. Even airline industry blogs were covering the story, questioning the culture of executive privilege that enabled such behavior. "You should see Twitter," Angela texted again. "People are sharing stories about Victoria's past incidents. Looks like Daddy's cleanup crew missed a few." Marcus watched as more videos emerged. Cell phone footage from other flights, where Victoria had berated crew members, from restaurants where she'd thrown drinks at servers, from hotels where she'd screamed at staff. Each incident had been quietly resolved, the complaints withdrawn, the records sealed. But this time was different. This time, dozens of passengers had captured everything. This time, she'd assaulted a federal officer in plain view of countless witnesses. The break room door opened. Thompson stepped in, looking uncomfortable. "Reed, you might want to see this." He pointed to the TV, where Victoria's father, Charles Langford, was giving a press conference outside airline headquarters. The CEO looked polished and controlled, his expression concerned. "We take any allegations of misconduct seriously," Langford was saying. "We are conducting a full internal investigation and cooperating with authorities to understand exactly what occurred." The carefully crafted statement rang hollow against the viral videos playing beside his face on every news channel. Comments poured in, calling out the attempt at corporate spin. Marcus gathered his things, preparing to leave. His shift had officially ended hours ago, though the paperwork had kept him late. Through the terminal windows, he could see news vans gathering in the parking lot, their satellite dishes raised against the darkening sky. "Need an escort out?" Thompson offered, gesturing toward the media crowd. Marcus shook his head. "I'll use the staff exit." As he walked through the quiet corridors of the airport's secure area, his phone continued buzzing with notifications. The videos had reached tens of millions of views. Every major news outlet was running the story. Victoria's slap played on screens throughout the terminal, her face and actions exposed to the world. For a moment, watching the truth spread beyond anyone's ability to contain it, Marcus felt a surge of vindication. The public had seen everything. They knew exactly what had happened. He pushed open the staff door, stepping into the night air. The evening breeze carried the distant sounds of news helicopters and gathered crowds. Marcus walked toward his car, unaware that in corporate offices and government buildings across the city, plans for retaliation were already being set in motion. Marcus pulled into the Air Marshal Service headquarters parking lot in Dallas early the next morning. The familiar brick building loomed against the Texas sky, its windows reflecting the rising sun. He adjusted his tie, noticing dark circles under his eyes in the rearview mirror. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since yesterday. Inside, the usual morning bustle felt different. Conversations died as he passed. Colleagues averted their eyes or gave him tight, worried smiles. The videos had spread through the agency like wildfire. "Reed," called Janet from reception, her voice unnaturally formal. "Director Wallace wants to see you immediately." Marcus nodded, his stomach tightening. Standard procedure after an incident required a debrief, but something in Janet's tone set off warning bells. The elevator ride to the fourth floor seemed longer than usual. He checked his phone one last time before stepping out. The hashtag Justice for Marcus was still trending, now accompanied by thousands of supportive messages from law enforcement officers nationwide. Director Wallace's secretary waved him straight in. Inside the office, Wallace sat behind his desk, flanked by two men Marcus didn't recognize. One wore the uniform of Internal Affairs, the other an expensive suit that screamed, "Corporate Lawyer." "Sit down, Reed," Wallace said, not meeting his eyes. Marcus took the chair, his back straight, hands folded professionally in his lap. The wall-mounted TV played silently, showing Victoria Langford's face on a morning news show. "We've reviewed the preliminary reports from yesterday's incident," Wallace began, shuffling papers. "And frankly, we have serious concerns about your conduct." Marcus blinked. "Sir? You created a public spectacle that has embarrassed this agency and a valued airline partner." Wallace's words came out rehearsed. "Your aggressive response to a minor dispute has generated unnecessary media attention. With respect, sir, she assaulted a federal officer." The man in the suit cleared his throat. "The video shows you deliberately escalating a situation that could have been handled discreetly." "The video shows me maintaining professional composure while being racially abused and physically attacked," Marcus said evenly. Wallace winced. "That's your interpretation. Others see an officer using excessive force to humiliate a frightened young woman." The TV caught Marcus's eye. Victoria was speaking now, dabbing tears with a tissue. The caption read, "Victim of police brutality speaks out." "Turn that up," the Internal Affairs officer ordered. Victoria's voice filled the room. "Was terrified. He grabbed me so roughly. Wouldn't listen to reason. I've never felt so violated and threatened." Marcus stared in disbelief as she described an entirely fictional version of events. In her telling, she'd merely questioned a seat assignment when an aggressive officer had traumatized her. "This is absurd," Marcus said. There are dozens of videos showing exactly what happened. Videos can be misleading, the lawyer said smoothly. Context is important. Wallace slid a document across the desk. Effective immediately. You're suspended pending a full review. We'll need your badge and weapon. Sir, this is retaliation. Her father. This isn't about Charles Langford, Wallace cut in sharply, though his face suggested otherwise. This is about maintaining public trust and professional standards. Marcus looked between the three men, reality sinking in. The system he'd served faithfully for years was turning against him to protect wealth and power. The Internal Affairs officer held out an evidence bag. Badge and gun, please. With steady hands that betrayed none of his inner turmoil, Marcus removed his credentials and service weapon. The badge made a dull thud as it hit the bottom of the bag. You'll be contacted regarding the review process, Wallace said, already standing. Until then, maintain media silence. That's an order. In the elevator down, Marcus watched his reflection in the polished doors. Same uniform, same posture, but something fundamental had shifted. The weight of his missing badge felt like a phantom limb. His phone vibrated. Angela Porter had sent him a link to Victoria's interview. The comments were flooded with outrage. Not at him, but at her obvious lies. Yet, here he was, suspended while she played victim on national television. The walk through the lobby felt endless. Colleagues who'd shared coffee with him yesterday now studied their shoes or computer screens. Only Janet caught his eye, giving him a small, sad nod. Back in his car, Marcus sat gripping the steering wheel. His phone showed missed calls from reporters, civil rights attorneys, and support groups. The news ticker on his dashboard displayed another headline: A.R. Marshal suspended after confrontation with CEO's daughter. The drive home passed in a blur of talk radio hosts debating the incident. Some defended him fiercely, citing his spotless record and the clear video evidence. Others parroted Victoria's version, questioning his judgment and suggesting racial bias against a frightened white woman. His apartment felt empty when he finally walked in. The silence pressed in as he loosened his tie and sank onto the couch. On his coffee table, his personal phone continued lighting up with notifications and messages of support. The TV came alive with Victoria's tearful face as she described her trauma to a sympathetic morning show host. I just want people to understand how scary it is, being threatened by someone with that kind of power. Marcus muted it, staring at his badge and gun lying on the table. Symbols of authority and responsibility he'd earned through years of service. Now stripped away because wealth and influence mattered more than truth. The setting sun cast long shadows across his apartment. His phone buzzed again. Angela sending another message of support, promising this wasn't over. Outside, a news van crept past his building, probably hoping for a statement. He sat in the growing darkness, feeling the weight of institutional betrayal, but refusing to let it break him. The badge on his table caught the last rays of sunlight, a reminder of the oath he'd taken, not to power or privilege, but to justice itself. A gentle knock at Marcus's door broke the morning silence. He'd been staring at news coverage for hours, watching his career dissected by talking heads who'd never worn a badge. Through the peephole, he saw Angela Porter, the TSA supervisor from yesterday, holding 2 coffee cups. Thought you might need this, Angela said when he opened the door. Steam rose from the cups, carrying the rich scent of dark roast. Mind if I come in? Marcus stepped aside, grateful for the company. His apartment showed signs of a sleepless night. Papers scattered across the coffee table, laptop open to news sites, his phone still buzzing with messages. You look like I felt during my first suspension, Angela said, settling onto his couch. She handed him one of the coffees. 15 years ago. Wrote up a CEO's son for trying to bring a knife through security. Next thing I knew, I was on administrative leave. Marcus sat across from her, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. What happened? I fought back. Won my job back, too. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. Listen, I've been doing some digging. Victoria Langford? This isn't her first rodeo. Not even close. She pulled out her tablet, swiping through documents. 3 years ago, she assaulted a flight attendant in Miami. Charges disappeared. 2 years ago, racist tirade against a gate agent in Chicago. Somehow never made it into official records. Last year, drunk and disorderly on a flight to LA. Guess what? No consequences. Marcus studied the incident reports, his jaw tightening. Her father buried all of this? Charles Langford has turned covering up his daughter's mess into an art form. Angela's voice held controlled anger. He's got friends in federal agencies, judges who owe him favors, PR firms on retainer. The whole system bends for him. She pulled out another document, a list of names and dates. These are all the employees who tried to report Victoria over the years. Every single one either got fired, transferred, or pressured to quit. Until now, no one's had clear video evidence and the courage to stand their ground. Marcus set down his coffee, running a hand over his face. So, that's why Wallace folded so quickly. Langford's influence reaches all the way up. Higher than you'd believe. But here's the thing. Langford's never faced someone he couldn't intimidate or buy off. And he's never had to deal with this much public attention. Angela smiled. Which is why I brought backup. Another knock at the door. Angela nodded encouragingly. Marcus opened it to find a man in his late 40s, carrying a worn leather briefcase. His suit was modest but sharp, his handshake firm. David Ortiz, he introduced himself. Civil rights attorney. Ms. Porter called me about your situation. David settled into an armchair, immediately commanding attention despite his relaxed posture. He pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. I've reviewed the videos, witness statements, and your service record, he said. What they're doing to you isn't just wrong, it's illegal. Clear case of retaliation against a federal officer for performing his lawful duty. Marcus leaned back, studying the attorney. You've gone up against people like Langford before? That's my specialty. Corporate bullies who think money puts them above the law. David's eyes sparkled with controlled intensity. 3 years ago, I took down a bank president who had a judge in his pocket. Last year, won reinstatement for a whistleblower against a pharmaceutical company. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. He spread several documents across the coffee table. Here's what we know. Victoria Langford assaulted you on camera. Her father is using corporate resources to protect her. Again. They're counting on you backing down, taking a settlement, signing an NDA. Standard playbook for them. But this time it's different, Angela added. The videos went viral. People are angry. Even Langford can't make millions of witnesses disappear. David nodded. We can file a federal civil rights lawsuit. Challenge your suspension as retaliatory. Go after the airline for enabling a pattern of discriminatory conduct. The discovery process alone would expose years of cover-ups. Marcus picked up one of the documents. A draft legal complaint naming Charles Langford, the airline, and various federal officials as defendants. This could end my career, he said quietly. Your career's already under attack, David replied. Question is, do you let them win, or do you fight back? Not just for yourself, but for everyone else they've silenced over the years. Angela touched Marcus's arm. You're not alone in this. I've got other employees ready to come forward about Victoria's past incidents. They've been waiting for someone strong enough to take the first stand. Marcus stood, pacing to his window. Outside, Another news van had joined the first, reporters hoping for a statement. His phone showed more messages of support from fellow officers, civil rights groups, even passengers from the flight. "They're counting on you being afraid," David said. "Men like Langford maintain power by making good people doubt themselves. But you've got something he doesn't: truth. And in my experience, truth properly deployed is stronger than any corporate legal team." Marcus turned back to them, studying his badge still lying on the table. Everything he'd worked for, everything he believed in about justice and duty, had led to this moment. "If we do this," he said slowly, "we do it all the way. No settlements, no private deals. The truth comes out, completely." David smiled, extending his hand. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Marcus gripped the attorney's hand firmly, feeling the weight of the decision, but also a surge of resolve. Angela beamed, already pulling out her phone to start making calls. The morning sun streamed through his windows, catching his badge and making the gold shine. Outside, the world waited to see if one more powerful family would escape consequences. Inside, 3 people began planning how to prove that justice could still prevail against privilege. Charles Langford stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, hands clasped behind his back, watching the city sprawl beneath him. 60 stories up, the world looked orderly, controllable, just how he liked it. Behind him, his PR team waited in leather chairs around a gleaming conference table. Newspapers, tablets, and laptops covered the surface, each displaying another angle of his daughter's viral humiliation. "The videos are still trending," Sarah Chen, his head of communications, reported. "Over 10 million views across platforms. Public sentiment is," she hesitated, "strongly against Victoria." Charles turned, his reflection sharp in the polished table. At 62, he carried authority in every silver hair and crisp line of his tailored suit. "I don't pay you to tell me problems, Sarah. I pay you for solutions." "We've prepared several approaches," said Tom Wheeler, their crisis management specialist. He slid forward a thick folder. "The key is redirecting public anger. Make Marcus Reed the villain." Charles settled into his chair, scanning the document. "Show me." Tom clicked his remote. The wall screen filled with mock-up headlines and social media posts. "First, we flood the zone. Question his judgment, his temperament, his motives. Rogue officer terrorizes female passenger. Power-drunk Marshal exceeds authority." Sarah picked up the thread. "We've found 3 passenger complaints against Reed from his early career. Minor stuff, rough handling during turbulence, excessive pat-downs, but reframed properly." "Good," Charles nodded. "What else?" "Victoria's interview is set for tonight. Prime time, friendly host." Tom pulled up the talking points. "She'll appear vulnerable, emotional. Designer dress in soft pink. No makeup artist. We want her looking naturally distressed. The narrative," Sarah continued, "is clear. A young woman, flying alone, roughly handled by an aggressive male officer who escalated a simple seating misunderstanding into a traumatic incident." Charles studied the screen, his expression calculating. "The racial angle?" The room tensed slightly. Tom cleared his throat. "We're dancing around it. Subtle code words. Intimidating, threatening, aggressive. Let viewers draw their own conclusions." "We've lined up several commentators," Sarah added. "Former air marshals, security experts. They'll question Reed's tactics, suggest he has a history of overreaction." "What about his suspension?" Charles asked. "Perfect timing," Tom said. "We leak that Internal Affairs was already investigating him. Suggest this incident fits a pattern of concerning behavior." Charles stood, pacing slowly. "The videos are still a problem. We're pushing alternative angles, different contexts," Sarah explained. suggesting the clips are selectively edited. Our social media team is seeding doubt, questioning what happened before cameras started rolling. And Victoria knows her role? Charles's voice carried an edge of concern beneath the steel. Extensively coached, Tom assured him. She'll be demure, slightly shaken but brave. We've scripted careful pauses, a moment where she fights back tears. The host knows to offer comfort. Tissue ready. Charles nodded, then pressed his intercom. Send in legal. 2 attorneys entered, carrying more folders. The civil suit is ready, the senior partner reported. Allegations of excessive force, emotional distress, civil rights violations. We'll file tomorrow morning, right after Victoria's interview builds sympathy. And the federal angle? Our contacts are applying pressure. Marshal service leadership is already backing away from Reed. Another week of media heat. He'll be looking for a quiet resignation deal. Charles returned to the window, watching his empire's reflection overlap the city below. For 30 years, he'd built this airline, protected it from threats large and small. No self-righteous marshal would undo that now. Execute the plan, he ordered. Full spectrum. I want Reed's name toxic by morning. The team dispersed, leaving Charles alone with his thoughts. A photo on his desk caught his eye. Victoria at 8, blonde curls and innocent smile, sitting on his lap in the cockpit of his first plane. He'd given her everything, cushioned every fall. Perhaps that had been his mistake, but it was too late for such reflections. The machine was in motion. By evening, the assault began. News alerts pinged across the country. Breaking. Air Marshal's troubled past revealed. Sources question officer's mental state. Airline passenger speaks out. I feared for my life. Social media erupted with carefully planted doubts. Why isn't anyone showing what happened before? My cousin worked with Reed, said he was unstable. Just another power-hungry cop. At 8 o'clock sharp, Victoria appeared on Evening Focus with Dana Burke. The set was soft-lit, intimate. Victoria perched on the edge of her chair, hands clasped in her lap, wearing a pale pink cashmere sweater that made her look younger, vulnerable. I just wanted to go home, she said, voice trembling perfectly. The seat arrangement was unclear. I tried to explain, but he became so angry, so aggressive. Dana leaned forward sympathetically. You must have been terrified. I was. Victoria dabbed at her eyes with the tissue. I'd heard about police brutality, but to experience it, to be manhandled, humiliated, treated like a criminal. She paused, fighting back tears exactly as rehearsed. And now this video is everywhere, Dana prompted. It's devastating, Victoria whispered. My father taught me to respect authority, but this officer, he seemed to enjoy hurting me, embarrassing me. I keep asking myself, what did I do to deserve this? In his apartment, Marcus watched the performance, jaw clenched tight. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues, friends, even strangers who'd found his number. The comments under the interview video scrolled past. Poor girl. Fire that thug. Where's BLM when white women are attacked? On screen, Victoria concluded her carefully scripted testimony. I just want justice, she said softly. Not just for me, but for anyone else this officer might hurt. No one should face abuse from people meant to protect us. Marcus muted the TV, staring at his reflection in the dark screen. The truth felt distant now, buried under an avalanche of lies. But somewhere in that artificial storm, the facts remained unchanged. A slap, a badge, a law that should apply to everyone equally. He picked up his phone, opening the text from David Ortiz. Saw the interview. Ready to fight back? Marcus typed 2 words. Absolutely ready. Marcus's apartment had become their war room. Papers and laptops covered his dining table, where Angela Porter and David Ortiz sat, reviewing the damage from Victoria's interview. Empty coffee cups dotted the landscape of documents. "They're hitting every channel," Angela said, scrolling through her tablet. "Social media, news segments, radio shows. Even got some politicians making noise about law enforcement reform now." Marcus stood by the window, watching rain streak the glass. "Amazing how fast they work when they want to bury someone." "Classic corporate playbook," David replied, marking notes on a legal pad. "Flood the zone with alternative narratives, muddy the waters until people can't tell truth from fiction." He'd shed his suit jacket, sleeves rolled up for battle. But they made one mistake. "What's that?" Marcus turned. "They got sloppy. Desperate people usually do." David held up printouts of the media coverage. "Look at the timing. All these independent stories dropping within hours. The coordinated messaging. It's too perfect." Shows their hand. Angela nodded. "And those old complaints they dug up?" "I checked the dates. 2 happened when you weren't even on duty, Marcus. They're manufacturing evidence." Marcus was about to respond when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Is this Marshal Reed?" The voice was male, nervous. I have information about Charles Langford and his daughter. Things they covered up." Marcus put the phone on speaker. "Who is this?" "Tom Bailey. I was senior accountant for the airline until last year. I've been watching what they're doing to you. It's not right." A shaky breath. "I kept records, wire transfers, hush money payments, fake expense reports, years of burying Victoria's incidents." David leaned forward. "Mr. Bailey, I'm David Ortiz, Marshal Reed's attorney. Can you be more specific about these records?" DUIs swept under the rug. Assault charges disappeared. One flight attendant she put in the hospital. Paid off with airline funds listed as employee wellness programs. Papers rustled in the background. "I've got it all documented. Dates, amounts, account numbers." "Why come forward now?" Angela asked. "Because I helped hide it," Bailey said quietly. "Coded the transfers, filed the fake reports. Told myself I was just doing my job. But watching them try to destroy you for actually doing yours..." He paused. "I can't stay quiet anymore." David pulled out a fresh legal pad. "We need to meet, Mr. Bailey. Somewhere public but discreet. There's a diner off I-85, Ray's Place. Open 24 hours. Mostly truckers at night. I can be there in an hour." They agreed on signals and hung up. Marcus grabbed his jacket, while David called his investigator to run Bailey's background. Angela insisted on driving. Her car was less likely to be recognized. Ray's Place was a chrome and neon slice of 1950s America, floating in a sea of asphalt and diesel fumes. At 11 p.m., a few scattered customers nursed coffee and pie under flickering fluorescent lights. Tom Bailey sat in a back booth, exactly as described. Mid-50s, thinning hair, wearing a wrinkled dress shirt, and defeated expression. Marcus slid in across from him while Angela and David flanked the booth. Bailey's hands shook slightly as he pushed a thick manila envelope across the table. 15 years of records, he said quietly. "I started making copies after the flight attendant incident. Knew someday it would all come crashing down." David carefully opened the envelope while a tired waitress poured coffee. Inside, hundreds of pages told the story in cold numbers and corporate euphemisms. "This payment here," Bailey pointed, "Christmas Eve, 2019. Victoria drove her BMW through a store window. 2 people injured. Filed as property maintenance and customer relations." He flipped pages. March 2021. She assaulted a gate agent who wouldn't upgrade her friend. Employee development and retention bonus. Another page. September 2022. Racist tirade against a Filipino cleaning crew. Paid them each $50,000 to sign NDAs, listed as Diversity Initiative grants. Marcus studied the documents, his cop's instincts tingling. "These are originals?" Bailey nodded. "With metadata and digital trails. Certified copies of the wire transfers, too." Charles was careful, but he needed someone to actually move the money. "That was me." "Why did you stay so long?" Angela asked. Bailey stared into his coffee. "Golden handcuffs. Good salary, pension, health care. Kept telling myself it wasn't my problem." He looked up at Marcus. "Until I watched that interview tonight. Saw them trying to do to you what they did to all the others. Except this time, they're attacking a federal officer for enforcing the law." David finished his review. "This is dynamite, Mr. Bailey. But using it means you'll have to testify." "I know." Bailey squared his shoulders. "I'm ready. Already updated my resume. Figure I won't be in corporate accounting anymore after this. But maybe that's not bad." A truck stop shower started drumming the windows. Marcus watched the rain while David explained witness protection protocols and Angela arranged safe housing. The documents felt heavy in his hands, weapons more powerful than any service weapon. "They'll come at you hard," Marcus warned Bailey. "Same playbook they're using on me." "Let them." Bailey managed a tired smile. "I'm tired of helping bullies win." David carefully transferred the files to his briefcase, clicking the locks shut. "We'll need a few days to verify everything and prepare the filing. Stay low, Mr. Bailey. No social media, no unusual movements." They left Bailey with burner phones and emergency contacts. Back in the car, rain hammering the roof, Marcus held David's briefcase in his lap. Inside, years of corruption and cruelty were reduced to paper and ink, waiting to be transformed into justice. "You okay?" Angela asked from the driver's seat. Marcus nodded, fingers tracing the briefcase's edges. The weight felt right, like truth finally finding its balance. David was already making calls. "I want forensic accountants on this tonight. Full documentation chain, ready for the SEC and Justice Department." He paused. "They thought they could bury you, Marcus. Instead, they're going to dig their own grave." The marble halls of the federal building echoed with footsteps and whispers. News vans lined the street outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward the gray morning sky like metal flowers. Marcus straightened his tie, touched the badge in his pocket for luck, and walked through the security checkpoint. Angela met him in the lobby, her usual TSA uniform replaced by a crisp black suit. "Ready?" "Been ready since the day it happened." Marcus kept his voice steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. They'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed his testimony until the words flowed like water. But seeing the crowd of reporters outside had made it real in a way their practice sessions hadn't. The hearing room looked like a small courtroom, with polished wood panels and the federal seal mounted behind the raised panel desk. 5 officials sat in high-backed chairs, 3 men, 2 women, all wearing expressions carved from stone. Their nameplates gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Representatives from the Air Marshal Service, Department of Justice, and Federal Aviation Administration. Marcus took his seat at the testimony table, David arranging files beside him with precise movements. The room filled quickly with spectators and press. A sketch artist in the front row captured Marcus's profile with quick strokes of charcoal. The door opened again. Victoria Langford swept in wearing a conservative navy dress that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly salary. Her face was carefully arranged in an expression of demure suffering, but her eyes still held that familiar gleam of contempt. Charles Langford followed, flanked by 3 lawyers carrying leather briefcases that screamed, "Expensive." He didn't look at Marcus. "This hearing will come to order." The lead official, Director Reynolds, tapped her gavel. "We're here to review the events of Flight 2317 on April 15th, specifically the arrest of Victoria Langford by Air Marshal Marcus Reed." She fixed the room with a stern gaze. "This is not a criminal proceeding, but an administrative review of Marshal Reed's conduct and fitness for duty. Victoria's lead attorney stood. "We intend to show that Marshal Reed used excessive force and abused his authority to humiliate our client, causing her significant emotional distress. The evidence will show exactly the opposite," David responded calmly. Marshal Reed acted with exemplary restraint in the face of assault and racial harassment. Director Reynolds nodded. "Marshal Reed, please take the stand." Marcus walked to the witness chair, feeling every eye in the room. He was sworn in, the oath familiar from countless court appearances over his career. "Please describe the events in question," Reynolds directed. Marcus kept his voice steady and clear. "I boarded Flight 23117 as part of my regular duties. I had been assigned Seat 2A in first class, a position that allows good visibility of the cabin." He described finding Victoria in his seat, the initial conversation, her refusal to move. "And then what happened?" Reynolds asked. "Ms. Langford became increasingly aggressive. She used racial slurs, suggested I didn't belong in first class, and demanded to know who let me on the plane." Marcus maintained eye contact with Reynolds, ignoring Victoria's theatrical eye-rolling. "When I again asked her to return to her assigned seat, she slapped me across the face with significant force." Victoria's attorney jumped up. "Objection! My client barely touched him. This is extreme exaggeration." "We have the video," David interrupted smoothly. "Perhaps we should view it now." The room darkened slightly as a screen descended from the ceiling. The viral footage, captured by 3 different passengers, played in sequence. The first showed Victoria's initial refusal to move. The second captured her racial taunts clearly. The third, shot from the perfect angle, showed the slap in brutal clarity. In slow motion, Victoria's hand swung in a vicious arc, connecting with Marcus's cheek with enough force to snap his head sideways. The sound cracked through the hearing room's speakers like a gunshot. Several panel members flinched. The footage continued, showing Marcus's calm response, the display of his badge, the professional way he handled the arrest. No excessive force, no abuse of power, just clean, by-the-book law enforcement. When the lights came up, Victoria's composed mask had cracked slightly. She whispered urgently to her father, who was rapidly turning an alarming shade of red. "The videos speak for themselves," David said into the silence. "But they're only part of the story." "Marshal Reed, please tell the panel about the aftermath." Marcus described the captain's warning about pressure from above, the suspension, the media smear campaign. His voice remained professional, but the underlying steel was unmistakable. "This isn't just about one incident," he concluded. "It's about whether the law applies equally to everyone, regardless of wealth or connections." Victoria's attorney attempted to paint the slap as a minor misunderstanding and suggested Marcus had deliberately provoked his client. But under David's skilled cross-examination, Victoria's story began unraveling. She couldn't explain why her version contradicted the video evidence. She couldn't justify her recorded racial slurs. "Were you in your assigned seat, Ms. Langford?" David asked. Well, no, but did you strike a federal officer after he asked you to move?" "He was being aggressive." The video shows him standing still with his hands at his sides. "Yes or no? Did you strike him?" Victoria's face flushed. "Yes, fine. I slapped him. He deserved it for not knowing his place." A shocked murmur ran through the room. Charles Langford closed his eyes in defeat while his lawyers frantically scribbled notes. Director Reynolds called a recess. As the panel filed out, their faces showed a mix of disgust and determination. Victoria stormed from the room, her designer heels clicking angry Morse code on the marble floor. Charles Langford remained, huddled with his legal team. Their whispered conversation grew heated, his face darkening as the lawyers apparently delivered unwelcome news. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but the body language told the story. They were losing, and losing badly. Marcus sat in his living room, the TV news playing softly as darkness settled outside his windows. The street lights cast long shadows through the blinds, marking time like a slow-moving sundial across his carpet. His phone buzzed, another news alert, then another, and another. Breaking news! Airline CEO Charles Langford accused of years-long cover-up. He turned up the volume as Angela let herself in, carrying a bag of takeout. She'd been checking in on him regularly since the hearing, bringing food and updates from her TSA contacts. Tonight, her usual calm demeanor crackled with barely contained excitement. "Turn to Channel 7, she said, setting down the food. The story just broke nationwide. The screen filled with documents, spreadsheets, emails, bank transfers, each one a nail in Charles Langford's corporate coffin. The accountant's files had found fertile ground among investigative reporters. They detailed years of misappropriated funds, hush money paid to Victoria's previous victims, and bribes to keep incidents out of police reports. Sources confirm at least 12 separate incidents were buried using airline resources, the anchor reported, including 3 assaults, 2 DUI accidents, and multiple cases of racial harassment against airline staff. Angela settled onto the couch, passing Marcus a container of food. "Look at the stock ticker." The airline's share price was in freefall, dropping by double digits as investors fled. Emergency statements from the board of directors scrolled across the bottom of the screen, promising full cooperation with investigators. The FAA has announced an immediate probe into safety and compliance practices. Another reporter announced, Senator Williams has called for congressional hearings into what she termed systemic corruption and abuse of power within the airline industry. Marcus's phone rang, David calling with updates. He put it on speaker. "It's a bloodbath," the lawyer said, sounding energized. 3 regulatory agencies just announced investigations. The SEC is looking into securities fraud. Charles Langford's been subpoenaed by 2 congressional committees. "What about Victoria?" Angela asked. "She's spiraling," David replied. "Tried to book a flight to the Cayman Islands, but her passport's been flagged. She's holed up in her penthouse, screaming at reporters through the intercom." On TV, they cut to footage of Victoria outside her building, looking nothing like the polished woman from the hearing. Her hair was disheveled, makeup smeared, designer clothes wrinkled. She shoved a camera aside, shrieking, "Don't you know who I am?" "They're playing that right next to the plane footage," Angela noted with satisfaction. Same entitled attitude, just without Daddy's PR team to clean it up. Marcus watched silently, remembering the sting of her slap, the weight of his suspension papers, the long nights wondering if the truth would ever matter against money and power. The news shifted to Charles Langford, leaving his office, surrounded by lawyers and reporters. Gone was the commanding CEO presence. His shoulders sagged under his expensive suit. Camera flashes caught the defeat in his eyes. "Mr. Langford, did you authorize payments to cover up your daughter's assaults? Is it true you threatened employees who reported her behavior? Will you resign as CEO?" He pushed through the crowd without answering, ducking into a waiting car. But the questions followed him, each one representing another crack in his carefully constructed shield of influence. "The airline's board has called an emergency meeting," the anchor reported. "Sources say they're discussing leadership changes and strategic options, including possible bankruptcy protection." Angela's phone chimed with messages from her TSA colleagues. "The whole airport's buzzing," she said. "Remember that gate agent Victoria screamed at last month? She's filing a formal complaint now. Others are coming forward too." More alerts popped up on Marcus's phone. The police were reopening old cases involving Victoria. Former airline employees were speaking out about a culture of cover-ups and retaliation. Each new revelation built on the others, creating an unstoppable cascade of consequences. Senator Williams's office just released a statement, David said over the speaker. She's calling for your immediate reinstatement with full back pay and a public apology. Marcus leaned back, letting out a long breath. The weight of the past weeks began to lift, replaced by a quiet sense of validation. He thought of all the people who'd faced similar situations without video evidence, without brave witnesses, without the truth breaking through. It's not just about me, he said quietly. It's about everyone who's been told to stay quiet because someone had money or power. Angela nodded, understanding in her eyes. That's why we couldn't let it go. That's why it mattered. On screen, financial analysts debated the airline's future. Words like leadership vacuum and systemic failure filled the air. The stock price kept falling as more documents emerged, each revelation worse than the last. They showed Victoria again, this time trying to escape through her building's service entrance. Her face crumpled when she saw the cameras waiting. No more smug smile, no more confident strut. Just a scared woman facing consequences for possibly the first time in her life. "Your father can't fix this," a reporter called out. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Victoria's only response was to cover her face with her designer bag, hurrying back inside as her world continued to unravel. Marcus and Angela watched in companionable silence as the news cycled through each new development. The takeout containers sat forgotten as history unfolded on screen. Years of entitlement and abuse of power crashing down in a single evening of truth. "You know what this means?" Angela said after a while. "Real change. Not just for the airline, but for everyone who thinks they're above the law." Marcus touched his badge, still in his pocket where he'd kept it during his suspension. "Equal justice," he said softly. "That's all I ever wanted." They sat together as the news continued, watching power yield to truth, watching arrogance bow to accountability, watching justice slowly but surely find its way home. The federal courthouse loomed against the morning sky, its stone columns casting long shadows across the plaza. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes stretching upward like metal trees. Marcus straightened his tie as he climbed the steps, flanked by Angela and David. Inside the courtroom, Victoria sat at the defendant's table, her designer outfit replaced by a conservative gray suit that couldn't hide her nervousness. Her hands fidgeted with a tissue, shredding it into tiny pieces. 2 rows behind her, Charles Langford occupied his own seat of shame, his usual commanding presence diminished by weeks of public scandal. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, called the court to order. The room fell silent except for the scratch of reporters' pens and the soft whir of cameras. "Will the defendant, Victoria Langford, please rise?" the judge instructed. Victoria stood on shaky legs. Her lawyer placed a steadying hand on her elbow. "Ms. Langford, this court has considered your plea agreement carefully," the judge began. "The charges against you are serious. Assaulting a federal officer is not a minor offense, regardless of your background or family connections." Victoria's shoulders trembled. Gone was the entitled woman who'd stormed through first class. In her place stood someone finally facing consequences. "However, considering your lack of prior convictions," the judge paused, looking pointedly at the gallery where everyone knew about the covered-up incidents. "On official record, this court accepts the plea agreement." The judge adjusted her glasses. "You are sentenced to 2 years of probation and 500 hours of community service, to be served specifically in airport maintenance and cleaning duties." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Victoria's face flushed red. "Your service will be supervised and documented. You will work alongside regular maintenance staff, performing the same duties they do. This includes cleaning terminals, bathrooms, and other facilities." The judge's voice hardened. "And yes, Miss Langford, this will be public. Consider it an opportunity to learn respect for those you've treated poorly." Victoria swayed slightly. Her lawyer steadied her again. "Additionally, you are banned from flying on any commercial airline for the duration of your probation, except when required for court appearances." The judge's gaze was stern. "Perhaps walking through airports with a mop instead of a first-class ticket will provide some perspective." Marcus watched from his seat, his face neutral, but his chest tight with vindication. Angela squeezed his arm gently. The judge turned her attention to Charles Langford. "Mr. Langford, please rise." Charles stood, his expensive suit hanging looser on his frame after weeks of stress. His lawyer rose beside him, clutching a thick folder of documents. "The charges against you are extensive," the judge continued. "Embezzlement of corporate funds, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. This court is particularly troubled by your systematic abuse of power to shield your daughter from consequences." Charles stared straight ahead, but his jaw twitched. "Your plea agreement includes immediate resignation as CEO, cooperation with ongoing investigations, and significant financial restitution." The judge shuffled her papers. "You will serve 18 months under house arrest, followed by 5 years of probation. You are permanently barred from serving as an officer or director of any public company." The former CEO seemed to shrink with each word. His empire, built over decades, crumbling in minutes. "Furthermore," the judge added, "you will pay a fine of $20 million, separate from the corporate restitution. Perhaps that will help you understand that money cannot buy immunity from the law." Cameras clicked rapidly as Charles nodded stiffly. His lawyer began gathering their papers. The judge surveyed the courtroom. "Air Marshal Reed, please stand." Marcus rose, straightening to his full height. "This court commends your professionalism and dedication to duty. Your actions upheld the law equally, regardless of wealth or status." The judge's stern expression softened slightly. "That should be unremarkable. But sadly, it proved extraordinary. You are a credit to your service." "Thank you, Your Honor," Marcus replied quietly. The judge raised her gavel. "This court is adjourned." The sharp crack of wood on wood echoed through the room. Victoria burst into tears, her sobs no longer generating sympathy from onlookers who'd seen through her act. Charles turned to his daughter, but she jerked away from his attempt to comfort her. Reporters rushed from the courtroom, racing to broadcast the news. Marcus remained seated, watching as Victoria was led away to begin processing for her probation. Her designer heels clicked unsteadily on the floor, each step taking her further from her privileged bubble. Charles followed shortly after, surrounded by his legal team. The man who'd once commanded boardrooms and bent regulations now shuffled toward house arrest. His power evaporated. Angela stood, straightening her TSA uniform. "Ready?" Marcus nodded, rising beside her. David gathered his briefcase, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. "The airline's new management called," David said quietly as they walked. "They want to discuss systemic changes, training programs, accountability measures, real reform." "Good," Angela replied. "Change has to start somewhere." They reached the courthouse steps. Camera flashes erupted as reporters spotted them. But unlike the Langfords, Marcus walked tall, unafraid of the attention. "Air Marshal Reed, how do you feel about the sentence?" "Mr. Reed, what's your message to others facing workplace discrimination?" Marcus paused, considering. Angela and David flanked him protectively, but he didn't need shielding anymore. "The law applies equally to everyone," he said clearly. "That's not just a saying. It's a promise we have to keep fighting for." He descended the steps steadily, head high, the morning sun warm on his face. Behind him, the courthouse stood as it always had, But something had changed. A small crack had appeared in the wall of privilege, a reminder that justice could still prevail. Angela matched his stride, her presence a reminder of all the quiet allies who'd helped truth emerge. David walked on his other side, the lawyer who'd believed in the case when others wavered. Together, they made their way through the crowd, leaving the Langfords' shattered empire behind. The familiar hum of the airport terminal surrounded Marcus as he walked toward his gate 6 weeks later. His polished shoes clicked against the gleaming floor. The same floor where somewhere Victoria Langford was probably pushing a mop under the watchful eye of her probation officer. He'd seen the photos in the news, the former CEO's daughter in a maintenance uniform, learning what real work felt like. The images hadn't brought him joy, exactly, but they represented something important. Accountability had finally caught up to those who thought themselves above it. At the gate, Marcus presented his boarding pass. The agent's eyes widened with recognition. "Air Marshal Reed," she said warmly, scanning his ticket. "It's an honor to have you flying with us today." Marcus nodded politely, still unused to being recognized. The case had made national headlines for weeks, sparking conversations about privilege, power, and justice. His inbox had filled with messages from other federal officers and airline workers sharing similar stories of abuse they'd endured in silence. The jet bridge stretched before him as he boarded the aircraft. This time, the flight attendant at the door beamed with genuine respect. "Welcome aboard, sir," she said. "We're so glad to have you with us. First class is to your left." Marcus made his way to seat 2A, the same seat number as that fateful day. But this time, no entitled passenger waited to challenge his right to be there. Instead, a businessman in the adjacent seat gave him a knowing smile. "You're him, aren't you?" the man asked as Marcus stored his briefcase. "The air marshal who stood up to the Langfords?" "Just doing my job," Marcus replied modestly, settling into his seat. "No," the businessman shook his head. "You did more than that. You showed that the system can work when good people refuse to back down." A flight attendant approached with pre-flight drinks. "Would you like anything, Air Marshal Reed?" "Water, please," Marcus said. As she poured, he noticed her name pin, Sandra. "I've been flying for 20 years, Sandra confided, her voice low. "What you did? It changed things. Management actually listened when we complained about abusive passengers last week. They're not just brushing it off anymore." Marcus accepted the water with a grateful nod. The airline had indeed undergone major changes. The new CEO had implemented strict anti-harassment policies, improved staff protection measures, and established clear consequences for passenger misconduct, regardless of status or connections. Through the window, Marcus watched ground crews preparing the aircraft. He remembered Angela's words from their last coffee meeting. "You didn't just win a case, Marcus. You cracked open a door that was shut for too long." She was right. The Langford incident had exposed more than one family's corruption. It had revealed the quiet complicity that allowed such behavior to flourish. Now, other companies were reviewing their practices, fearing similar scandals. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, welcoming passengers aboard. Marcus noticed the different tone in these announcements now. More emphasis on mutual respect, clear statements about passenger conduct expectations. A young black girl walked past his seat with her mother, her eyes widening as she recognized him. She waved shyly, and Marcus smiled back. That was another unexpected outcome, becoming a symbol of standing firm against injustice. The boarding process continued smoothly. Marcus observed the crew's interactions with passengers, noting the newfound confidence in their demeanor. They no longer seemed afraid to enforce rules evenly, knowing their administration would back them up. His phone buzzed with a text from David. Airline board approved the new training program. Starting next month. You made this happen. Marcus thought about the journey from that first confrontation to now. the suspension that had felt like defeat, the allies who'd stepped forward, the evidence that had finally tipped the scales. Each piece had mattered, building toward something larger than himself. The plane began pushing back from the gate. Out the window, Marcus could see his reflection overlaid against the terminal buildings. He looked the same as that day, neat suit, calm demeanor, but he felt different. Stronger, perhaps. More certain of the ground he stood on. The safety demonstration began, and Marcus noticed passengers actually paying attention, showing respect to the crew. Small changes, but meaningful ones. The culture was shifting, slowly but surely. As they taxied toward the runway, Marcus recalled Victoria's last appearance in court. The judge had made her apologize to him personally. Her words had been stilted, rehearsed, but her humiliation had been real. Sometimes, he mused, that was how change began. Not with genuine remorse, but with the realization that actions had consequences. The engines roared to life. Marcus felt the familiar surge of acceleration as the plane raced down the runway. He'd made this journey countless times before, but today felt different. Each mile marked distance not just in space, but from what had been to what could be. The plane lifted smoothly into the air, the ground falling away below. Marcus watched the airport shrink, becoming a pattern of lights and lines. Somewhere down there, Victoria was learning lessons she should have learned long ago. Charles was confined to his mansion, his empire dismantled. Justice had many forms, he reflected, and sometimes the most fitting punishment was simply removing the shield of privilege. The aircraft banked gracefully, catching the morning sun. Marcus's reflection smiled back at him from the window. Not a triumphant grin, but the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd held his ground and seen truth prevail. The sky stretched endlessly ahead, blue and clear, like possibility itself. A soft chime indicated they'd reached cruising altitude. Marcus reclined his seat slightly, at peace with where he was and what he'd done. The truth had won out. Justice had been served. And somewhere far below, the world was slowly, steadily changing for the better. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.